So let's talk about the technique of bobber-dogging, which is very popular for winter steelhead, and for good reason. It's super effective. When it comes to bobber-dogging, there is actually a couple different kind of styles of bobber-dogging. Let's talk first, high water, kind of traditional bobber-dogging that happens in higher water or bigger rivers, often from a sled or a drift boat. And what that will entail is kind of what you would see where the bobber's laying down on the surface and it's dragging that weight along the bottom pretty consistently, tick, 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 and it's kind of trolling it like a boat would. Say you got a boat right here, you're hanging your trolling gear down, you got this on the bottom, and then behind it we have often a double rig. This is what's left of a spawn sack after a cutthroat ate it up. But a double rig from like a yarnie or a eggs or both down to a bead or even a 2-bead setup. That's very popular and it's super effective, especially to slow down the bait, which is really nice in faster water, higher water. Thing is, steelhead are not always in walking speed water, especially bigger fish can kind of hold in some heavier current. So it's really nice to have that option, get that weight ticking along the bottom, have that thing pretty much laying over, kind of bouncing around. But the kind of in-betweener between that and what I would basically call float fishing beads or something like that is more of, me and my buddies call it Kelly dogging because it's what our buddy Kelly does, but it's a lot like bobber-dogging, except instead of dragging the whole time, you're kind of float fishing it and occasionally glancing off the rocks with your weight. And so this is especially nice in big bouldery areas and stuff where you might hang up a little more by bobber-dogging. And with this way, often if you're using, just like a single bead or whatever, which is more common than a double rig doing this, you'll want to put a split shot right in the middle. So you have that bait, making sure it's right near the tops of the rocks and such to get seen. And that is really effective, especially when the water slows down. It's not necessarily super fast. If you do get into that walking speed water and you want to just kind of glide that bead along and get a nice presentation where you're always kind of touching bottom or nearby bottom, but not necessarily on it. And that way you're not slowing it down as much. And so in that slower water, it's more of a natural presentation. And then definitely in deep pools or, pretty slow water, it's nice to actually just, you could actually run the same float for that style as long as you're not using like a cut off bobber-dogging float. And basically just take your standard setup, add a split shot or two down to the bait, and you can actually vertically present it. Nice float fishing presentation. That's especially nice when it's low and clear. You don't want your weights and such hitting the bottom and, big old line going through the middle of the water column. It can be nice to just go with a longer leader with a couple split shot down it and float fish a bead. So one very important side of this is where you set your bobber stop. If you're intending on dragging the bottom and really being able to fish a lot of different depths, you're going to be going down river, you might be fishing 4 feet to 6 feet to 7 feet, back up to 4 feet. You do that dragging technique where you're just bouncing that weight along the bottom and dragging that thing with the bobber kind of floating sideways. And in that case, you pull a bobber stop all the way up to your first guide often, maybe even all the way down to here, and then cast it out. And that bobber is going to have so much room to drop that weight down, just kind of bounce it along, and it'll, hopefully keep the weight out of the rocks from snagging just by virtue of the lift from the bobber. And then, of course, if you're more just intending to glance off the rocks every now and then you're going to want to bring it down based on that, just how deep it is. And of course, like any type of float fishing, be very precise with your bobber stop placement so that you make sure you're within a foot of the bottom. Just choose your bobber-dogging presentation or float fishing presentation for bead based on how fast the water is. Again, really fast water, just drag that thing, just boom, boom, boom. A little slower, walking speed, that sort of stuff, maybe you don't need to drag it as much. And then big, deep pools where the fish are resting down deep or maybe in a tail out, run that float setup instead. Check us out, Salmon, Trout, Steelheader. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe and hit the like button if this helped.